Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Shropshire Council's Cabinet meeting on Wednesday, the 5th of January 2022. I managed to get that bit right. We've got Cabinet members and Councillor David Asthma, Democrat Opposition Leader, in the room, and we have a number of councillors and officers joining us online. I am obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. And can I please remind members to identify your name and role before speaking, so that it is clear to those watching the meeting as to who is speaking. So starting the meeting, first we have apologies. I don't believe we have any. That's great, thank you. Any disclosable pecuniary interests? No, thank you. We now move to item 3, the minutes of the meeting on the 1st of December 2021. Do I have a proposer for those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Potter. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Carroll.
One minute.
Yes, you can, Councillor Wagner.
About item 60, talking about availability of jabs, and obviously the availability of national flow tests at the moment is a key issue. And I wonder whether the Director of Public Health could give members an update on the situation in Shropshire.
I can see if it's
just about accuracy.
Oh yes, that's true. Actually, can I talk to you afterwards about that, David? Because as Tim said, it's about accuracy. I'm not sure that Rachel's with us. Oh yes, she is. I apologise, but I'll talk to you afterwards about that. So apart from that, nothing else. So all those in favour of the minutes from the last meeting, thank you. Okay, moving on to public questions. We have 2 questions received. Tim Collard is going to read out the questions, as neither of the people asking the questions are available to be here today. So the first question is from Stephen Maloney.
Yes, thank you. And this is a question to the Leader of the Council. Question goes like this. The Council's constitution says, as a councillor, you are trusted to make decisions on behalf of your community, and your actions and behaviour are subject to greater scrutiny than that of ordinary members of the public. You should be aware that your actions might have adverse impact on you, other councillors, and or your local authority, and may lower the public's confidence in your or your local authority's ability to discharge its functions. For example, behaviour that is considered dishonest and or deceitful can bring your local authority into disrepute. As Leader of the Council, your role is to not only provide direction, but leadership and setting of standards and expectations for others to follow. You need to lead by example. And Section 27(1) of the Localism Act 2011 requires a relevant authority to promote and maintain high standards of conduct by members and cooperative members of the authority. There are a number of land holdings belonging to the company, CMS Jaw Limited, that you do not seem to have declared, and I understand that the advice given to you by the monitoring officer is that you do not need to declare these land holdings, reliance being made on the LGA guidance below, which is then quoted. In general, there is no requirement to list the land holdings of companies or corporate bodies included in the register. The only requirement is to register any tenancy between such bodies and the authority, brackets under corporate tenancies. Obviously, you can only be expected to register those you ought reasonably to be aware of. So, for example, if you work for a large house builder, you may not be aware of which land in the local authority's area they had options on. You do need to be mindful of your level of control in the company and the effect this may have on your benefits from the land. For example, if you and your spouse jointly owned a farming business, you would be the sole beneficiaries of any land owned by that farm. And as such, it is strongly advised to register land held by companies in which you have a controlling interest. The link to the website. Declarations are a matter for each individual councillor, but seeing as you and your partner apparently jointly own CMS Jaw Limited, then despite what the monitoring officer says, it seems from the guidance above that you are strongly advised to register all the land holdings of that company. So my questions to you are, number 1, in light of recent actions by some of the local Conservative members of Parliament do you not feel that you should declare all the land holdings of CMS Draw Limited located within the council area to avoid bringing the council and Shropshire into further disrepute?
Thank you, Tim. My response to the question is as follows. I am very conscious of the need, especially as leader of Shropshire Council, to maintain the public's confidence in the actions and behaviour of councillors. I am confident that I have followed the correct procedures at all times. CMS Draw does own some very small, insignificant pieces of land that have been left over following developments and/or transfers. None of these pieces of land are developable, but if any of them were to be affected or impacted upon by other developments of any sort, then of course I would declare interests in the usual manner. I believe that I have complied with both the previous code of conduct and the new one from the 1st of December by registering my interest in CMS Draw Limited. Thank you, Tim.
And question 2, did you receive any tenants discounts when CMS Draw Limited purchased the council smallholding Villa Farm Condover from Shropshire Council, and was the sale openly marketed?
And my response to that part of the question is I was not involved with CMS Draw Limited when Villa Farm was purchased, and the sale, which took place in March 2004, was pre-Shropshire Council. Thank you, Tim. So, moving on to the next question, which has been received by, which has been put in by Emma Bullard.
And her question is this: has a date been set for the Northern Planning Committee to make a decision on the North West Relief Road? If so, when will that be? In July 2019, the Council expected the Planning Committee decision to be made in spring 2020. By December 2019, the date was expected to be in summer 2020. Since the planning application was submitted in March 2021, committee dates have been suggested in summer 2021 and then in late autumn. Previous portfolio holder for highways appeared to expect a planning decision by the end of 2021. The current portfolio holder for physical infrastructure has been quoted in the press recently as saying that the North West Relief Road is settled and that attention can now turn to other infrastructure projects. Saying that the road is settled suggests that the case is ready to go to the planning committee. If it is not ready, what are the issues that still need attention? How close are they to being resolved? Is there a deadline for claiming the funding allocated by the Department of Transport from the Large Local Majors Fund?
Thank you, Tim. And responding to that question is Councillor Ed Potter.
Thank you very much for the question. It was anticipated that the report would be considered at Planning Committee in December 2021. However, as the report was being prepared for December, there were still some outstanding matters requiring further attention by statutory consultees before they could finalise their formal responses, i.e. Environment Agency, Archaeology and others. It was considered necessary to give more time for the matters to be concluded and therefore anticipated that the application will go to committee in spring 2022. In terms of the deadline for claiming DFT funding, officers have been working closely with DFT, who are fully aware of the project timelines, and there is no concern.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. That brings to an end that item on public questions. We now move on to member questions. The first question is from Councillor Rob Wilson, who's joining us online. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much. My question is, please, can you provide the cost of repairing damage to pavements in Shropshire for the financial years 2017-18, 18-19, 19-20 and 2021? Please, can you also provide an estimate for the proportion of damage that was caused by pavement parking? Also, for these financial years, can you provide the amount of compensation claims for trips and falls on the footway? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Answering that question will be Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Wilson, for the question. It's not possible to disaggregate the cost of damage caused by pavement parking alone from other factors that impact footway conditions such as vegetation root damage, failing pavement structure, utility equipment failure, or indeed legitimate crossing of the footway by vehicles. The cost information associated with footway works is in a table which is attached to the question. It is rather a long and detailed table. I'm happy to read it out if that would be part of your supplementary, or it will be attached to the question. In terms of the amount of compensation paid for trips and falls on pavements as per the years requested, in the year 2017-18 it was £14,981. In the year 18-19 it was £27,946.06. In the year 19-20 it was £8,978, and in the year 2021 it was £6,294.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just ask if you could provide an update on the pavement parking consultation that the government launched? It's now, I think, 3 months overdue, and what preparations are the council making for that publication?
Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. As Councillor Wilson says, we're still awaiting government publication of the results of that consultation. I don't think it would be particularly prudent for us to try and prejudge what those consultation responses would be by doing any extensive work in advance of publication of that. So we await the publication by government, and we're ready to spring into action when that becomes public.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. The next question, sorry, I keep remembering to take my mask off. The next question comes from Councillor Wagner, who has joined us online, but fooled me because he's joined as an external. Councillor Wagner, good morning.
Morning. So residents and users of Racecourse Lane in Bicton Heath have been being promised a crossing just south of Oxon Primary School since at least 2019, linked to the Shropshire Homes development at Leighton Park. This would be in the best interests of safety for parents, children and residents alike if installed properly. Since my election earlier this year, I've sought to push this forward. In May, a highways officer informed me that Shropshire Homes and Shropshire Council Streetworks team were aiming to programme works in as soon as possible. In June, they informed us there was no start date. A later request I made as local member for an update in late September did not receive a response, and as of date, neither has a late November message. Would the Cabinet and relevant portfolio holder be able to provide me with an update on what's going on and when we can expect the long promised improvements?
Sorry, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Leader. I thought you were trying to drag out for suspense. The works along Racecourse Lane form part of a planning obligation attached to Planning Permission 14/02402/FUL, which required the developer of the former Shelton Hospital to provide a pedestrian access and associated raised table crossing on Racecourse Lane. Works commenced on site to create the pedestrian access, however. Works to install the proposed raised table crossing were subsequently put on hold due to objections received from neighbouring properties. Regrettably, we do not currently have a start date for the works to commence on site, but Shropshire Council officers have written to the developer, Shropshire Homes, to establish their formal position with regard to this matter. In view of the concerns raised by the local community, officers will continue to work closely with the developer to assist with the programming and delivery of the works, and are currently looking into various options to ensure works are delivered at the earliest opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Wagner, do you have a supplementary?
Would it be fair to say then that the existing plans are unlikely to be implemented, at least without a reasonable amount of amendment?
Councillor Carroll.
I cannot say that at this time. It's just not possible to make that judgment yet.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. The next question is from Councillor Nigel Hartin, who also joins us online. Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning, Leader. My question is as follows. Council tax policy as it currently stands on long-term empty properties, there is an additional charge of up to 300% extra on long-term empty properties until the properties are again lived in. This applies not only to owners of such properties who have kept them empty for many years, but also to new owners purchasing such properties should they be sold on. I've become aware that this policy is having what I assume to be unintended consequences. I have 2 such properties in my division which have been purchased by 2 young people to bring back into use as first homes. The condition of the properties when purchased being uninhabitable without significant updating made them affordable for them to purchase in what would otherwise be a housing market out of their financial reach. They were therefore very pleased to be able to acquire these 2 small linked terraced homes and looking forward to being able to bring them back into habitable condition with the help of family members in the building trade. What they did not know until after purchase was that they would be hit by punitive council tax levies amounting in one case to more than the mortgage payments, which they could not have possibly afford to pay. On my advice, both submitted Section 13A appeals to the head of finance, which have been subsequently rejected by the council. This may result in the properties having to be sold on, probably to a developer with large pockets who could afford the short-term financial hit, whilst the properties were brought back into a livable condition. So my question is therefore to the portfolio holder of finance is that is the portfolio holder for finance aware that council policy as currently set out actively discourages long-term properties being brought back into use other than by large-scale developers or the very rich? And two, will the portfolio holder bring forward proposals to full council to stop this happening in the future, and so that other young people's dreams of home ownership are not trashed in this way in the future? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harting, responding to that, Councillor Butler.
Good morning, Nigel. Thank you for the question. Since 2013, the government have enabled building authorities to levy a council tax premium in relation to any dwelling that, for a continuous 2-year period, has been unoccupied or substantially unfurnished. The regulations were inserted as 11B of the Local Government Finance Act 1992. Up until 2019, the premium was levied at 50%, and since the 1st of April 2019, the government have enabled building authorities to increase the level of premium charge incrementally with effect from 1st of April 2019. The premium can be charged at 100% for properties unoccupied and substantially unfurnished for more than 2 years. From the 1st of April 2020, the premium can be charged at 200% in relation to dwellings unoccupied and substantially unfurnished for more than 5 years. From the 1st of April 2021, the premium can be charged at 300% for properties unoccupied and substantially unfurnished for more than 10 years. The regulations are clear that the decision to levy the premium is based on the condition of the dwelling, and this means that any changes in ownership which would change liability for council tax have no impact on levying the premium, which must be charged once the council has agreed the charging policy for the year. The regulations provide for the government to prescribe classes of dwelling where the premium will not apply. They do not enable building authorities to make their own determinations for exceptions to their policy to levy the premium. A fundamental principle in council tax regulation is the 6-week rule. This stipulates that initial discounts that can be awarded when a property first becomes unoccupied and unfurnished cannot be rewarded in respect of a property unless it has been either occupied or substantially furnished for a continuous 6-week period. That means that unless a property subject to the premium is occupied or substantially furnished for the continuous 6-week period, then the premium will continue to apply. This information is clearly referenced on the council's website, and I'll come back to that. Shropshire Council did not levy the premium until 1st of April 2014 and have increased the level of premium charged incrementally as allowed by subsequent legislation. The decision to levy the premium is agreed by full council each December when the council agrees the tax base for the forthcoming financial year. The 6-week rule is explained as part of this determination. A number of appeals from other billing authorities against the council tax premium were heard by the Valuation Tribunal in 2014 after the premium had been introduced. The then President of Tribunal Service, Professor Zellick, concluded in 2014 that there were 3 avenues open to taxpayers who wish to appeal against the imposition of the premium. They were apply for a judicial review in the High Court, apply to the billing authority for discretionary relief, or complain to the local government ombudsman, although recent ombudsman cases have concluded they have no jurisdiction in this matter. Discretionary discount has been considered and refused in the case referenced by Councillor Harting. Going back to Councillor Harting's direct questions to myself, in question 1, is the portfolio holder for finance aware of the council policy as currently set out, actively discourage long properties being brought back into use other than by large-scale developers or the very rich? I would actually dispute that, because I would imagine these cottages only came to the market because we are actually penalising them with a higher rate of council tax. And secondly, due diligence needs to be done by the purchaser and their agents and conveyors to ensure that they are fully aware of the council tax rate when they purchase the property. And if at that stage it is unaffordable, they can negotiate a reduction in the asking price of the property to cover them while they make their modifications to the property. Question 2. Will the portfolio holder bring forward proposals to full council to stop this happening in the future so that other young people's dreams of home ownership are not trusted this way in the future? No, I won't, and bear with me, I should just bring some further information if I may, Leader. At the present, our premiums on council tax adds over 700 Band B and D equivalent properties to the tax base, generating over £1 million a year for vital council services, and creating a financial penalty for individuals holding on to properties that could otherwise be brought back to the market and used. This policy is reviewed annually. It was reviewed in December 2019 at full council. It was voted across party for 59 councillors supporting the policy, 1 abstention. In 2020, it was also fully approved across party with 60 councillors voting in favour, with no against and no abstentions. I do note, however, Councillor Hartin is absent at both of those council meetings. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Hartin, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I mean, thank you very much, Gwilym, for your extensive reply. I'm disappointed, obviously, with 1 or 2 of the responses that you've made, particularly in terms of bringing forward any future proposals. I wonder whether or not it might be opportunistic for the council to consider whether or not we should have another look at this, because I don't think any of us were who were present at the council meetings that you referred to were particularly aware that this consequence that I've set out could potentially happen. And I'm just wondering whether or not a task and finish group might be a way forward here.
I'll tell you what, I'm more than happy to do, Nigel. I will talk to the appropriate chair of scrutiny and see if we can send it to scrutiny in the near future, subject to their work programme, if that helps.
That would be very helpful. Thank you, Gwilym.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Thank you, Councillor Hartin, for the question. The next question is from Councillor David Basma, who is in the room. Councillor David Basma.
Thank you. The first question. Council adopted the school streets motion in July 2020. Since then, just 1 school benefited from this policy, Colham in Shrewsbury. Both myself and other councillors have raised concerns about the lack of progress in implementing this policy. At Council in September 2020, Councillor Ed Potter said the consideration of school streets would be rolled into the review of 25-hour limits outside schools, but that does not appear to have happened. When will the Colham school street scheme be reviewed, and when can we expect other schools to consider such a policy? And when will the review of 25-hour limits outside schools be published? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Basma. Answering the question, Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Asthma, for the question. In response to your question, Council approved a motion of implementing a school speed reduction policy outside of all Shropshire schools where appropriate. This project encompassed state-funded maintained schools and academies that do not currently have a mandatory 20-mile-per-hour speed limit. That's 127 schools county-wide. In total, 179 sites have been reviewed, as some schools have multiple sites. All local members, town and parish councils and schools are informed of surveys in their area and asked to let us know of any potential influencing factors. The approved Cabinet and full council report provided a timeline of research, investigation and the development of a programme for implementation during the financial year of 2020-21, with interventions outside of schools to begin in the financial year of 2022-23. This was explicit within the approved report, and this timetable is on track, with key milestones achieved. The investigation and assessment work has been completed. School leaders will begin to be engaged and briefed, as will local members and town and parish councils in the new year. As the first tranches of work are consulted upon, local consultations are programmed, and then work is due to be implemented during the new financial year as per the agreed timetable. It is worth remembering that the COVID pandemic and lockdowns rendered any data captured outside of schools meaningless until traffic levels return to a more normal volume. Data that has been captured so far is as follows: existing speed limits, road characteristics, pedestrian provision, environmental conditions, existing parking provision and restrictions, reported personal injury accidents, modal split data, planned future maintenance, potential for seal schemes, and other programme schemes in the pipeline. A process of supporting work was undertaken to identify any other factors that could be reasonably addressed alongside a 20-mile-per-hour scheme. One of these options may be school streets, and the pilot scheme at Conan Primary School has been recently extended. Further consultations across Shropshire will take place starting in January and February as the detail for the county-wide LC WIP, which is Local Cycling and Walking and Implementation Plan, is developed across key towns. This work will be complementary and support this initiative. The portfolio holder for education and I have recently been briefed on progress, and a request for this subject to be placed on an appropriate scrutiny agenda has been received. Work to liaise with and engage with schools is set to begin imminently. Hence, the programme is progressing to the timetable and is on budget.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Asthma, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thanks very much for that full response. I just wondered, has there been an assessment of the Colham school streets policy, because that has been going for some time now, and I think it's been reasonably successful as far as I'm aware. And I wondered whether there's been an official kind of report on that.
Councillor Carroll.
The consultation responses have been received and have been collated. An official report hasn't yet been produced for that, but it will be in the near future. That's the reason for the extension to the pilot project, to allow the consultation responses to be formalised into a full report to be brought forward to Cabinet and Council and considered by members, and at that point it will be decided whether to make that a permanent arrangement and whether it will be appropriate for other school locations as well.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Asthma, your second question.
Yes, thank you. This concerns Acton Scott Historic Working Farm. In a recent press statement on December 6th, the council made claims about visitors to the farm and its annual deficits. Please supply me with the following information. 1, annual visitor numbers since 2014, annual deficits since 2014, and 3, whether the farm has been considered for COVID grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Asthma. Answering your question is Councillor Celia Motley.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Asthma, for that question. I have got a whole chart of the visitor numbers between 2014 and 2021. I'm happy to read them out if you want me to, otherwise we can send them to you. But if you'd like a snapshot, Councillor Asthma, which might be helpful, I can tell you that in 2014 the visitor numbers were 18,623, peaking at 21,169 in 2019, and then obviously reducing in 2020 and 2021 to 4,326 and 6,312. But the visitor numbers, as you can imagine, for those 2 last years were reduced by the lockdown and restrictions imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic regulations. And also the figures for 2021 reflect the closure of the farm from the 23rd of June following the E. coli outbreak and ongoing review of the facility and its operation. In answer to your question 2, again, I can give you all the annual deficits since 2014. Again, you might just like a snapshot, and I can provide the full gamut for you. The deficit in 2014-15 was 160,846, rising to 215,000 pounds and 132 in 2017-18, and rising again in 2020-21 to 227,857 pounds. And in answer to your question 3.3, whether Acton Scott Working Farm was considered for COVID grants, I can confirm that it was. The 2021 budget included COVID grant support of £15,173 for Acton Scott, and the 2021-22 budget included COVID grant support of £30,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Motley. Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Asthma?
No, just thanks very much for that detail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the end of members' questions. So we move on to item number 6, which is scrutiny items, and there are no scrutiny items today. Item number
Leader,
6.
could I just make reference to the fact this is the second time we've had no scrutiny items at Cabinet. I am concerned about the kind of state of scrutiny, given its statutory function, and there should be proper scrutiny, particularly regarding the recent cancellation of task and finish groups for financial budget. I do think that we need to reconsider the way in which scrutiny is being done and make sure that there is proper scrutiny reports coming back here, because I do feel at the moment that the scrutiny is not functioning as it should do.
As I've said to you before, Councillor Asthma, I don't disagree with you, and changes are going to be made to the way that scrutiny operates. I can't force the chairman to bring reports forward to cabinet meetings, but I will have a word with the full chairman to see what's going on. Thank you. Moving on, item number 7, setting the council tax base for 22-23. Councillor Gwynn Butler.
Thank you, Leader. Again, this is an annual report that we bring forward. It's pretty straightforward. The calculations are based as set out in the document. I'd just like to make a comment regarding 2.3. It is interesting that we've had another year of COVID restrictions and regulations, and yet we're seeing a council tax increase in our bandy equivalents of 1.58%. In the year, and that represents how well Shropshire is doing in the housing market and the overall economy that comes with that. And I'd like to thank all involved with that. Not a lot more to say, Chair. I move the recommendation set out in item 3.1 to 3.12 for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Seconder?
Yes, sorry, Councillor Gittins, happy to second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gittins. Any questions? Not seeing any online or in the room. All those in favour? Thank you. It's passed unanimously. Moving on to item number 8, mid-year capital and the financial strategy 2022 to 2023. Once again, Councillor Gwynn Butler.
Right. Thank you, Leader. I will start my report by saying a big thank you to the finance team in pulling all this together in difficult times, and all the directors and assistant directors across the whole organisation on the work they have done to find and allocate potential savings and new ways of working. It certainly hasn't been easy. I'd particularly like to thank Toyin Bamidele for her commitment over the time she has spent with us, and wish her well for the future now her contract is coming to an end and the draft budget is with us. Thank you, Toyin. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
It certainly hasn't been easy, and as this is my first midterm financial strategy report, it feels somewhat like a poisoned chalice. We started the process early back in June, and I was pleased to have the input from the whole of Cabinet on several occasions as we moved the process forward. I did undertake to try and bring the report to scrutiny before Cabinet, but unfortunately this was taken out of our hands by both the by-election and the lack of information forthcoming from central government, which was not received until just before Christmas. If at all possible, I will commit to bring future budgets to scrutiny prior to Cabinet if the information is available. I mentioned poison chalice. I use the phrase as we are unable to plan properly for the medium term on our revenue spend, as our settlement from government is still only for 1 year and all the grant funding is noted as one-offs, not continual base budget. We cannot be guaranteed we will have any of these budgets in 23-24 onwards. This leaves us in uncharted waters, and we have already started lobbying our MPs to influence central government policies to ensure our structural budget deficit is addressed on a permanent basis. This is not just a Shropshire Council problem. Nationally, councils that have to fund adult social care and children's services are all under extreme pressure, with more of the disposable budget being spent on those services. In Shropshire, I predict we will spend 80 to 85% of our disposable budget on care next year. To clarify that, most of that care is for children and adults under 65, and this actually represents the changing demographics of society in the third decade of the 21st century, and I strongly believe the government need to recognise this. So, if we're spending 80 to 85% on care, this only leaves us 15% for highways, rubbish collection, swimming pools, libraries, etc. It will not be enough for those services to continue as we know them unless we get an increase in our base budget. Until government address social care funding direct to local government or take the services into the NHS, we are at a stalemate. Irrespective of your politics, this has been avoided by all governments over the past 2 to 3 decades. Things have to change. The capital budget has also been looked at in great detail and rationalised to concentrate on future savings initiatives and/or revenue creation, and to help shape the future of Shropshire in line with our emerging new corporate plan, the Shropshire Plan, which I'll be bringing forward shortly. After today, once approved, the budget will go out for consultation, and I hope members will engage in the scrutiny process. Any members who require any information at any time or have other ideas for savings, please bring them forward to myself or the finance team. On a closing note, we all want what's good. We all want good things for our residents in Shropshire, but anything that is brought forward henceforth needs to be funded, and the only way we can do that at present is by further stopping something we are already spending money on, as there is no new money or the prospect of any new money in the short to medium term. Leader, I move the recommendation set out in 3, A, B and C for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I have a seconder in the room. Do I have any questions? Councillor Asthma, have you got your hand up there?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Butler as far as the seriousness of the situation is concerned. I think, you know, there is a basically we're using 13.2 million of reserves this year, and if we don't get an increase in funding, you know, we will run out of money basically. So I'm very concerned about. I'm surprised in the recommendations that it's not. We note the funding gap for the years 2023-24. I just think there could be a stronger recommendation there, and perhaps we should be lobbying very strongly, using every avenue possible, given the seriousness of the situation, for the LGA, through our MPs, and whatever avenue we can use, because I think the situation is very serious. So I'd like to just make there are a number of this is a very detailed and extensive report, and there are a number of areas where items of savings have been possibly identified. One of them was green waste, which I think has been looked at in the past. It received a pretty negative reaction, and I'm not surprised. I do think that would be a retrograde step to consider that for a saving area. And similarly on drainage maintenance, we know that there's been real problems with drainage maintenance, and it's one of the causes of floods in some areas. And I do think cutting back on that, I think, would be a retrograde step. One of the things about this report is that there is a huge increase in capital program. If you look at table 6.1, and that there also is a problem in terms of the capital receipts. We cannot guarantee that we will get enough capital receipts to cover all the items in the capital program. I know that's been dealt with to some extent by looking at reviewing the projects going forward, but I do think the North West Relief Road, I come back to it, but if you look at the figures, there's about £19 million which is due to come from the capital receipts to help fund the North West Relief Road. And if there are concerns about not having enough capital receipts and having to borrow more money, which in course has an impact on the revenue budget, then I do think we ought to be reviewing that, and we ought to be kind of looking to stop the North West Relief Road, because environmentally it's disastrous. It has the highways impact is not going to be as good as many people predict, and it creates a huge hole, I think, in the council's capital programme, and I think that needs to be reviewed. Going on, I am concerned about there's an element in this about a civic hub. I think in parts of this, in Appendix C, I think it is, I've identified £27 million to be spent on a civic hub. I think it's a complete waste of money. I don't think we should be building a new civic hub. And I would be, kind of very strongly objecting to that. There's also item of Pride Hill, another £37 million. I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but again, I'm worried that we're spending a lot of money. It's being brought into into that area. And lastly, there is mention about, I think in Appendix C, right at the end, there's mention of I think it's, if you look at it over the last one, linked to phase one is linked to phase one pre-prevention programme within the capital programme, and then under that elements about the Northwest Relief Boat linked to phase one. Are those two linked? Is this more money going on Northwest Relief Boat? Perhaps the officers might be able to inform me, if not now, then perhaps afterwards. I'd like some explanation about that. But my key point, I think, is that the Northwest Relief Road is creating a huge problem on our capital, and if we could actually stop that, we would be much more secure in the capital programme we've got, and we'd actually be able to do a lot more, I think, throughout the county.
Thank you, Councillor Van Zandt. I'm going to ask Councillor Gwilym Butler to come back to you on some of those items if he can, but I've also got Councillor Dean Carroll who wishes to speak. Gwilym, do you want 2 minutes, or do you want? You okay?
Yeah. What I'll say, David, is with the Northwest Relief Road, the additional capital income from the development sites unlocked by the scheme will actually go towards most of the extra external costs. So again, this can be brought up in when it all comes to scrutiny, but I am more than happy that what the impact that will have on the overall economy and what it will release moving forward will more than cover what we're going forward, and I'm sure Councillor Carroll might want to interject.
Councillor Carroll, you want to come back in on the Northwest Relief Road item?
Thank you. Councillor Butler took the words right out of my mouth, and this is something that shouldn't come as a surprise to Councillor Asthma or anybody else listening, because it's something that we've gone on record as saying, both in council meetings, in cabinet meetings, and through the press in the past. So I think that I think Councillor Asthma possibly had been slightly mistaken if he thought that that wasn't the case, as we've said it repeatedly.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. The other question, what I would say, Councillor Asthma, is that I'm sure that Councillor just promoted James or demoted him, I'm not sure which. James Wharton will answer those questions for you. I will repeat what Gwilym has often said, because some of those questions were really detailed. It would make more sense actually if you just email James, because Councillor Dean certainly did that and got all the information he wanted. The next person on the list that I have got, funnily enough, is Councillor Julian Dean.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the reports, and yes, thank you, James, for your detailed response to my email. I just wanted to, first of all, I think we just have to acknowledge that quite clearly austerity continues. And this is a disastrous period once again for local government, despite the fact that local government stood up and did its bit for COVID. We're being kicked in the teeth once again, and we need to be loud and clear about that. And we're still waiting for any sort of story as to what levelling up actually means. And so we do need to, I think, be a bit louder on that. I wanted to just make a few points about the capital budget, not the revenue one, but about the capital. The section 9 of the report is really interesting in that it lays out all sorts of ways in which the council could be thinking about investment, but it's abstract, and the reason it's abstract is because we just don't seem to have very many innovative, interesting schemes, which I think we ought to be looking at. So, for example, Kirklees is investing in care co-ops. Other places are investing more in renewable energy than perhaps we're doing. I think there's, the opportunities to begin to transform our economy to a zero carbon economy that's building community wealth are not being investigated sufficiently, as far as I can tell from what we're seeing. So we end up with abstract set of rules under section 9, but nothing really in the appendix C, which tells us what the priorities of the administration are. We're also told there's been, serious reconsideration of priorities. I don't remember that. That's clearly happened perhaps at cabinet level, but there hasn't been the involvement of the community, of the county to reconsider what our priorities are. So that appendix C, is not very exciting. Where that all takes me to is back to the points I made last time, that we're in a period of drift, and it was interesting that Councillor Butler says that we'll get a corporate strategy after we've seen the budget. Really, it should be the other way around. Surely we should have a corporate strategy that sets some terms for what we want to achieve, and then we get a budget that is based on that. And at the moment, it just feels like we're still in a period of drift, and we're not seeing that set of priorities coming forward. You know, things like retrofit. I mean, it's interesting that there are although there's mention of the climate action budget, there aren't many projects coming forward from there yet, and we really ought to be seeing projects on retrofit. And the other thing I think perhaps that is missing, if you look at Appendix C, is there's no plan there for or I'm not seeing anything there which is really substantially dealing with the housing crisis and building actual rentable homes, because we know the market is screwed. We need to be building rentable homes, and I'm not seeing that as a sufficient priority. So all of that leads me to conclude that we really need to get to grips with putting together a corporate strategy and an economic strategy which deals with the world we're in, which is one, you know, post-pandemic, post-climate emergency declaration, post-Brexit, which means that we have to really start to address community wealth building and greening our economy, and it doesn't feel like that is being really addressed with this what we're seeing, especially in Appendix C, which seems to be the aspirations as far as they stand at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. I'm going to bring mask off. I'm going to bring in members as they ask to speak, but I know that I've got a couple of other members who want to come back on some of the things that have been said so far. So moving on, Councillor Julia Buckley, who's in the room.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank the officers who produced this report and who in previous years had the foresight to set aside the reserves and the financial strategy reserves, which I'm also dismayed to see will be obliterated in 1 year, leaving us extremely vulnerable going forwards. I see here a really worrying trend. So we, as a council, as a Conservative council, we have failed to secure through our lobbying any additional funding from a Conservative government, and we also failed to secure funding from the external grants in levelling up. And so now we're having to obliterate our reserves just to fill the gap of 49 million. As I understand it, you're offering us another £9.3 million of cuts in the following year. And in your own words, you say that 90% of current taxpayers are paying more tax and receiving reduced services. That's before you cut another £9 million worth of services. I have to give you the latest news from Bridgnorth, which is that there is a campaign of people who wish to stop paying their council tax. They are saying to me, why should I pay for a service I don't receive? So that's some of your 97% right there. It's very difficult for me to provide an answer as to why they should keep paying council tax when actually they are now facing more cuts. And this morning in particular, I had hundreds of residents contacting me asking why Bridgnorth was not gritted following the closure of our depots. Schools, roads and paths to the schools were not gritted, and it was extremely dangerous. Which brings me on to my concern about your planned cuts, because £2 million of those cuts are planned from asset disposal. Can we please consider which assets we're disposing, who will be impacted, because these are your 97% of taxpayers who are footing the bill and they're having fewer and fewer services. So you've got us out of a hole this year because the government has given you nothing, but where will we be next year? The reserves have gone. This is just a disaster ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Alan Mosley.
Thanks, Leslie. I've been having significant problems with my sound system. I can barely hear you or anyone else come to that. That may be a good thing. Can you hear me okay?
Could I say no at this point, Alan? I can hear you loud and clear, as can the rest of the room.
Oh, well, that's good for you. I'm going to concentrate on the wider scene, really, because this is one of the numerous occasions we've had these meetings, looking forward to the budget and looking forward to better news. It's not coming, is it? It's worse and worse news. And this has been recognised by the Director of Resources, and I'd like to congratulate him on his report, because he has been open and honest about the disaster that's waiting to happen to our council and many other councils and public services and local government generally throughout the country. He does say in his forward that we've struggled with cuts over many years, but now we are moving into new territory, which means it's getting worse. And the more we can do to let people know, the taxpayers and the recipients of the services of this council, to know what this new territory is going to be like, then the better for them when they're making decisions in the future. We have a 50 million structural funding gap, and while the amount of money that we're getting from the council taxpayers is rising, 76% projected, as opposed to 55% 5 years ago, we all know, no matter how much gloss is put on it, that services are significantly suffering. Within this document, it does say that adult and children's services costs are rising at an unsustainable rate. Please note that, members of the public, these costs are rising and the funding is inadequate, so that everything is looking as though it's unsustainable, and this is in the forward to James's report. 80% of our expenditure is now on on adult and children's care. Julia did point out that something like 90%, it's actually in the report 97%, are paying a great deal more for services that they are not receiving because of the unsustainable characteristics of the social care budget. We're also aware, of course, that austerity and an obsession with privatisation and cuts is impacting on the NHS, on the police force, on all sorts of welfare and public services that makes our position and the position of the residents even worse in this scenario. So I hope that in the consultation that's going to follow this disastrous review of our financial circumstances, that residents will be up and about, and we hear from Bridgenorth already rebellion in a sense, and paying attention to this. And we must all, those of us who care about public services, must all make the situation known to the people of Shropshire. I also wonder what our MPs are doing about this. Have we got any outstanding statements from our MPs supporting Shropshire Council in their fight for better funding? No. Are you, leader, and the cabinet really strident in your approach? Presumably you're all out fighting for the Tory votes in North Shropshire over the last couple of months. Those are Tory votes for someone who will join in with the government who has been implementing these massive cuts over the last few years. I particularly want to say what regret there is within many members on our side particularly, and no doubt other people who care about public services, about the way in which our officers have had to respond in recent years. None of them entered the service to make cuts. None of them entered the service to see a diminution in their powers and in their ability to deal with social and economic needs within our communities. How much time are they wasting looking for cuts while they could be looking for improvements in services? So I'll just paraphrase something I've said previously in terms of what you should be doing, which is really talking to the Tory government, not being lackeys to a Tory government, in seeking their support and seeking their action in providing an income and services in support of the people of Shropshire, rather than a complete and utter stagnation and decline. I've talked about a budget based on a wing and a prayer. Unfortunately, in the words of James Walton, not of course a direct quote, even the wing has come off now, and we are facing a dire future in terms of the needs of the people of Shropshire and our capacity and our ability to provide for them.
Thank you, Councillor Mosley. I've got a number of cabinet members who wish to come back to you on some of the points you raised. The first one, Councillor Cecilia Motley.
Thank you, Leader. Actually, what I just wanted to do was try and correct a rather obscure bit of drafting, I think, with regards to the capital programme as it affects swimming provision, particularly at the quarry. because the impression that it gives there is that we're not proceeding with redoing the quarry swimming pool, and I think that is actually not the fact. What I would just like to remind members of is that the Cabinet agreement in December 2020, I'm sorry, I'm getting awful.
Can I ask you, you're not speaking? Try again, Cecilia.
Thank you. I just didn't want to be kind of booming at everybody. It's really not very nice. So just to go back, just to kind of update everybody once more, Cabinet in December 2020 agreed to work on a REBA Stage 2 concept design for the swimming in Shrewsbury project, and that includes both swimming provision sites. That's the one in the Sunderland Sports Village and also the quarry. And it's almost complete and is being prepared for consideration by Cabinet. We are actually committed to keeping swimming and fitness facilities in the heart of Shrewsbury Town Centre at the current quarry site, and to the additional swimming facilities at the Shrewsbury Sports Village. And I don't think that's clear at all from this item. The Stage 2 concept design will identify that the Sports Village pool needs to be completed first to retain the opportunity to swim in Shrewsbury, and that the quarry facility can't be funded immediately, not least because there are complications attached to the site which do not pertain to Sunderland. The proposed programme will allow Shropshire Council to maintain swimming provision for Shrewsbury throughout. So that means that we aren't going to get into a situation where we have no swimming provision in Shrewsbury, and allow the opportunity to explore alternative ways to deliver the quarry redevelopment. We're working very closely on the quarry redevelopment with Sport England, and we're hopeful that we will get support from them actually with this. The Swimming in Shrewsbury report planned for the March Cabinet meeting will expand upon this in more detail. So I'm sorry to go into it in some more detail, but I just wanted to try and correct that impression.
Yeah, that's fine, Councillor Motley. The reason we've brought that forward is because there was a bit of serious press interest in that, and we wanted to make it clear that the quarry was very much still in our plans.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Next on the list is Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Leader. I wanted to address some of the specific points raised by a couple of the speakers. It's not any of the comments that Adam made. I'll leave those to others, although I was interested to be heard to be called a lackey. I don't think I've ever been described as a lackey before, and I'm sure that party colleagues would be quite happy if I was. So moving on to some of the points that other speakers have raised, I'll come first to Councillor Buckley. In terms of gritting in Bridgnorth, I have been checking on a regular basis that the gritting programme has been going ahead, and to the best of my knowledge, there have been no problems with gritting. So I would encourage Councillor Buckley, if there is a part of the gritting route that has been missed on a night where the temperature has dropped below freezing, please do let me know. All of our trucks are equipped with GPS tracking, and they monitor the routes and the amount of spread that is done over the course of a night. And most of the coldest nights, it's done both from 4 PM in the afternoon before and from 4 AM that morning. So if there is any place that has been missed, please don't wait for a cabinet or council meeting to raise that. Please do come to us straight away and let us know if you believe something's been missed, and we can check into that. In terms of asset disposal that Councillor Buckley raised, I'm sure I just misunderstood the question or the point that was being made, but capital receipts aren't being used to underwrite gaps in the revenue budget. That would actually be illegal to do. We wouldn't be allowed to do that. What we're talking about is disposals from the capital programme where they no longer meet the objectives for which the asset was originally designed, and there's one on the agenda later, but it's in exam session, so I can't go into detail now. But for example, if we say that we purchased a site because we wished to advance the economic development of a community, and then 10 or 20 years down the line, that asset was self-fulfilling in terms of providing that function. We no longer need to operate it and can dispose of it to the market and reinvest that funding in providing that benefit in another location. It's also the case that there are assets sitting on our books which remain legacy assets from predecessor councils, such as the borough and district councils, or even the old county council, including small holdings which have been reviewed repeatedly over the last 13 years of unitary council's existence. And there will inevitably, as tenancies come to an end, be questions about whether the future of those assets lies within the council's own ownership, or whether it's better for the community and the council that those are disposed of. Those disposals that we talk about then lead to a capital receipt that is used to partially to help to fund the next stage of the capital programme. And where the revenue budget savings come from is because if the more of a capital receipt we can use to fund the capital programme, the less we have to rely on prudential borrowing with the associated revenue costs that that leaves. So I don't want anybody to be under the impression that asset disposal is being used as a way to balance the revenue budget, because it most certainly is not and could not be used for that purpose. Now coming on to Councillor Dean's questions, I'll take them in reverse order. In terms of housing projects, both Shropshire Towns and Rural Housing, Star Housing Council's arm's length management organisation, which administers our social housing stock, has been regularly delivering social rented and affordable rented and shared ownership development programme, and continues to do that. The next phase of that includes a significant project in the village of Weston Ryn, which has been several years in the making. There are other projects that it has been undertaking on former garage sites and redevelopments of other locations within the housing revenue account ownership and within the wider council land ownership. And Weston Ryn is the first site where it has looked to go in a major way beyond existing council ownership to build out affordable and social rented properties. Cornovi Developments Limited, which is the council's market builder, is actively building. It's currently on site in Ellesmere Wharf in Ellesmere and Frith Close in Monkmore and Shrewsbury. I'm anticipating that the first disposal, the first sale of property on Frith Close will be conducted in the first quarter of this year. The capital receipts generated by these initial development for sale will then go on to fund future mixed developments of both sale and private rented sector models, not too dissimilar to Telford's New Place model in terms of the private rented sector offer. This is something that I enjoy taking the time to discuss with Councillor Dean at the Cornovi Board Away Day that we both attended last autumn. And if you would like more information on that, I can always set him up with meetings with Harpreet, the Managing Director of Cornovi, or with James Theory, the Assistant Director for Communities and Homes. Turning finally to the issue of a lack of exciting capital projects, I would really take issue with that, because I believe that we do have a surplus of exciting capital projects, to the extent that because we've been cutting our cloth according to our means, we aren't able to bring all of them forward in one go as we would hope, but we'll have to phase them over multiple years and multiple financial strategy periods. And I'll give you some examples of some of the exciting projects that we are taking forward at the moment. The development of the redevelopment of the roundabout network at Mile End in Oswestry, which is currently on time and on budget, will open up a significant development site for the innovation park in Oswestry that has been promised for over a decade, but is finally, due to this highways redevelopment, able to be brought forward by the council in the near future, which will provide, I'm told, over £45 million of gross value added to the local economy. We also have our business park programme, which I was at the ground cutting ceremony for for Bishop's Castle Business Park last summer, which will be a huge expansion of commercial land available in the Bishop's Castle and South West Shropshire area. We have also been building schools to far higher than specified carbon standards, including carbon neutral passive house school development at Millbrace. And looking back into my old world of adult social care, we have a passive house standard independent living scheme being developed at Green Acres Farm Day Centre, just outside of Baschurch, which will be among the first passive house independent living schemes in the country, and will enable us to repatriate high need individuals that we currently don't have capacity or offer for in Shropshire. So that is just a snapshot of 4 projects, but I could have doubled or trebled that, but I am conscious probably everybody's getting tired of the sound of my voice, and I have to save my voice for several items on the agenda later, but I will hand back to the leader.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Next on the list, next on the list, Councillor Ian Nellins.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to go back to Councillor Dean's points about renewable energy. Just to remind you, there are some strong pipeline of renewable energy projects, some of which will enable private sector investment into the county as well. Examples are Museby Solar Farm. We've already passed that through, but there's an extension of that which will double its output, and that will go to full council on the 19th. We're also researching hydrogen plants and expanding our EV, electric vehicle charging points across the council. And just to also point out that Shropshire Council is recognised nationally as the second of councils nationally producing renewable energy. Thank you.
You got that one in before I did, Councillor Nellins. Thank you very much. Next on the list, Councillor Potter.
Thank you very much, Leader. I think Councillor Dean Carroll covered most of the points I was going to make, particularly around the capital budget and assets, and the ways in which we are using the assets that the council holds to generate revenue to support the much needed services throughout the county. I just want to touch on the points made by Councillor Asthma around the civic hub and the development of the Shrewsbury town centre, linking with the big town plan. Fully encourage you to engage in the process moving forward over the coming weeks and months. It is clear that this building has its problems, as we've experienced this week around the heating and the revenue implications on the budget that this particular building has for us. So if he's able to provide fully costed suggestions, the information is available to officers to open into dialogue discussion with us, I would be more than happy to engage on those processes, particularly around the Shrewsbury Town Centre redevelopment, Pride Hill, Riverside, and of course the Civic Hub moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. So just to recap, I've got Councillor Roger Evans waiting to speak, and I would then like to say a few words before I go back to Councillor Butler. Councillor Roger Evans are joining us online.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader, for allowing me to speak. I wasn't sure if I would be able to speak, but at the last Cabinet meeting, I asked a question about members scrutinising the budget, and an answer was given, and this is as recommended by both the LGA and the government. That has failed this year. Not sure if Councillor Buckley is I'm not sure if Gwilym is aware, but the task and finish group, which was programmed for this Friday, has now been cancelled. So members have had no access to the budget or being able to question it. And I would also pick up the note that Gwilym said earlier on about a 1.5% increase in the tax base for Shropshire. Urban areas, their tax base has increased. Shrewsbury Town Council, for example, tax base has gone up by 1.7%. But many small parish councils, for the second year in succession, their tax base has reduced. So all the houses are going into the main urban areas, very little into the rural areas, and with the finances that where we are with the pandemic and the reductions that many households have had, many more are not or no longer paying their council tax. So I wonder what this council is doing to assist the rural areas to overcome the problems that they are having, especially residents in those areas. And I noticed later on there is an exempt item in Shire's catering, and when that is discussed, I would hope that the consideration for the effect it has on small rural areas will be considered. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Just a couple of points. I will come back to Gwilym, who can wrap up some of the points you make as well. But before I do so, the task and finish group actually took place before Christmas, but you didn't attend. The one this Friday has been cancelled, correct, but the one that actually scrutinised the budget did take place on the Friday in December, which I think was the 19th, 17th, sorry, if my memory serves me. 20th. I apologise, Gwilym. I'm going to take the mask off because I just want to say a few things too. I think for the leaders of the opposition and other members that are in this room, if you think that anybody on this cabinet has sat back over the last 6 to 8 weeks and done nothing about the financial situation, you are incredibly mistaken. I'll be totally honest with you, Alan, I didn't do an awful lot in North Shropshire's by-election because I was concentrating on lobbying ministers at the Cabinet Office and also in the, whatever the department is called now, DLUF, regarding our situation financially. When I hear other council leaders talk about the problems they are having with their adults and children's social care budgets, and they mention figures from between 50 and 68%, I have never been so envious in all my life. We are likely to be spending 85% of our net budget on social care. This cannot continue. This is the point that we have made to government and we will continue to make to government. You ask us what we're doing in terms of our MPs. They might not have made any grand statements, but they are under no illusions as to the work we expect them to undertake on our behalf. We are in a really, really difficult position. There is nobody in this cabinet room that wants to reduce services for anybody. And I challenge the opposition. If you think you can do a better deal with the revenue budget situation we're in, please bring it forward. Because spending 80% at minimum of our monies on adults and children's social care leaves us absolutely no wriggle room whatsoever. And I will say, and I will agree with Councillor Mosley, that actually I really want to thank the officers for the work they've put in on this. The work that's been undertaken with Cabinet and with and myself has been absolutely phenomenal. And there was nobody more disappointed than I when we received that financial settlement, particularly as it was a 1 year settlement rather than a 3 year settlement. Because the comment made about having a corporate plan or our Shropshire plan after the year's budget, it wouldn't have been. The Shropshire plan was actually looking forward with us knowing what our finances were going to be for the next 2 years. That has not happened. I will not be lying down, and please don't ever call me a lackey, because that is one thing I am certainly not. My first loyalty is to the residents of Shropshire, and you will hopefully see that over the next 3 years. Councillor Butler, I'm going to come back to you to sum up those questions and to go back to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, for that. It's an interesting one. I've been listening to the debate and a few things I want to just say. I'd like to thank Julian for his constructive comments. And I look forward to talking to him in the spring, you know, and any ideas that he's got, I will certainly look at them. And that was a completely different attitude than the Labour opposition, who were just banging us with a bat. In regard to the corporate strategy and the plan, it should have been here today, Julian, but because of COVID and officer time, we weren't able to deliver it. It was my plan to have it before the medium financial plan, but unfortunately we didn't get there. It should be with us very, very shortly. Going back to Julia's comments and Alan's comments, it's really interesting because year upon year I've sat here and listened. Where is the alternative budget? Where is the solution of what we should be doing differently? And Alan spoke to the residents of Shropshire, so I think it's my time now. How many times have you heard Keir Starmer talking about the rural deprivation in the rural areas and the Shire counties? And if you think you're going to get more money for local government out of the Labour Party that just actually looks at the metropolitan and serious urban areas, you are seriously mistaken. And can I just also compliment our leader, Leslie? We actually got an extra £10 million in our budget this year. And if it wasn't for her lobbying ministers beforehand, I don't think we'd have got that. So don't think we are not doing it. Where are we today? We're the second day back at school. We have already met with our MPs yesterday and left them in no uncertain terms about what is going on. But if the residents of Shropshire think that they will get more from the Labour or Liberals with "you can't supply an alternative budget," there's no national programme in their manifestos for adult social care or local government support. They are seriously mistaken. Roger, understand your concerns about scrutiny. There will be more meetings to come forward. I do understand very much about the small rural parish councils, and I think it's a perfect time to look at the boundary review, whether the small ones need to actually look at getting a bit bigger, because it will help them moving forward in certain circumstances. Regarding collection rates on council tax, I'm pleased to report they are basically holding up quite strong, and we're within 1.5% of where we should be. And also help for communities, I am fully aware, as my colleagues in public health, is that we do have the COVID community support teams back in action supporting our communities. With that said, Leader, I move the recommendations A, B and C, and thank everybody for their coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. I have a seconder in the room. Councillor, it's me. No, I've remembered now. I'm seconding this one. So proposed by Councillor Gwynn Butler, seconded by me. All those in favour? Thank you. And thank you everyone for the debate as well. So moving on to item number 9. Again, Councillor Gwynn Butler. This is the Treasury Strategy Mid-Term Review.
Thank you, Leader. I can't believe we've got another one of these. These quarters seem to whiz by. Again, this is just our quarterly report, as we have to point out to you. I'm pleased to report the Council is still coming above its benchmarks. And all I'd like to do is to move the recommendation in 3.1 that members are asked to accept the position as set out in the report. Thank you.
And do I have a seconder for that, please?
Yes, Councillor Rob Gittins, happy to second.
Thank you. Do I have any questions on that one? No? Okay, all those in favour? Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 10, which is the Community Asset Transfer, Rad Valley Scout and Guide Headquarters. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Leader. This is quite straightforward and a piece of good news. It will, by securing the community asset transfer to the Copthorne Scout and Guide Management Group, it will enable them to unlock grant funding, initially for the repair of the roof, but also for future improvements that they wish to make to the site, and secure the long-term presence of those users at the heart of the community. It is a 99-year lease, which is a reflection of our commitment to the services and the groups operating from there. I'm quite happy to propose recommendation 3.1 in the report, and I will attempt to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight, happy to second, Leader.
Thank you, Kirsty. Do you have any questions? I'm not seeing any. Alan, is that a legacy hand that I've got up? Okay, must be. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That asset transfer has been agreed. Moving on to item number 11, which is the exclusion of press and public due to the nature of the next few reports. I'm quite happy to propose the exclusion of press and public. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Potter is seconding that. We will pause for 2 minutes while
Can I just make clear that I do not support that, and I think it should be the catering, school catering issue should be discussed in public. So I think the issue outweighs the public interest, particularly those of school children and parents, outweighs the commercial interests.
Thank you, Councillor Bazra. I'll take that point on board. I could say, however, that I think you've already done your bit on that one, haven't you? By linking it to the press, but we'll move on. Thank you. Thank you for one member of the press leaving the room. She can't get out the door.
I need to go the other way.